It's 3 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling. Your phone is face down. Your eyes are wide open. Your brain is doing that thing where it replays a conversation from 4 years ago on a loop you never asked for. You assume something is wrong with you, but the real answer is far stranger. For most of human history, waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a disorder. It wasn't insomnia. It was Tuesday. Your ancestors didn't sleep the way you think they did. They didn't lie down at 10 p.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. in one long, unbroken block. That idea, the one you've been measuring yourself against your entire life, is barely 200 years old, and your body still hasn't caught up to it. Let's go back, not centuries, millennia. Before electric light, before street lamps, before the glow of a screen could trick your brain into thinking the sun hadn't set, night was long. Depending on the season, darkness could stretch for 12, 14, even 16 hours. Nobody could spend that entire span unconscious. The body doesn't work that way. So it didn't. Historian A. Roger E. Kirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, medical texts, and literature from pre-industrial Europe. What he found, again and again, was a phrase that modern readers almost always skip past without noticing: first sleep and second sleep. People went to bed shortly after dark. They slept for 3 or 4 hours. Then they woke up, not in a panic, not reaching for a screen. They simply woke up in the middle of the night, wide awake, and stayed that way for an hour or two before drifting into a second block of sleep until morning. What did they do with that hour? They prayed. They talked quietly with a partner. They tended a fire. Some got up and visited neighbors because apparently 2 a.m. house calls were not considered strange. Others had sex, which physicians at the time noted was easier and more satisfying after a first sleep, when the body was rested but the mind was calm. Some just lay in the dark and thought. E. Kirch found records of people using that window to process dreams, to plan the coming day, to simply exist in a kind of unhurried mental space that we, with our anxiety about wasted time, have almost completely lost. This wasn't rare. It wasn't a regional quirk. It shows up in French, English, and Italian sources across hundreds of years. It was so ordinary that nobody bothered explaining it, the way you'd never explain to someone what lunch is. It was just what night was. So, what changed? Artificial light changed it. Gas lamps. Then, electric bulbs pushed bedtime later and later. Factory schedules demanded a single efficient block of unconsciousness that could be slotted between shifts. Sleep stopped being a rhythm your body chose and became a resource your employer needed you to ration correctly. By the 20th century, the two-part night had vanished from cultural memory so completely that when people started waking at 3 a.m., doctors gave it a name, a diagnosis, a pill. But your biology didn't get the memo. Neuroscientist Thomas Ware ran an experiment in the early 1990s that revealed just how deep this pattern runs. He took a group of volunteers and put them in a room with no artificial light for 14 hours a night, roughly mimicking a long, ancient winter night. Within weeks, without anyone telling them what to expect, their sleep split. They fell into a first sleep, woke for 1 to 3 hours in a calm, meditative state, and then dropped into a second sleep. Nobody had coached them to do this. Their bodies simply reverted to a pattern that modern lighting had been suppressing the whole time. That's the twist, isn't it? You think your 3 a.m. wake-up is a malfunction? It might actually be a memory. A default setting that your ancestors lived inside comfortably for tens of thousands of years, one your body still quietly tries to return to the moment you remove the artificial light that's been overriding it. But sleep wasn't the only thing that looked different in the dark. What ancient humans did in that waking window and in the hours before sleep altogether tells you something even stranger about why you scroll your phone at midnight instead of feeling tired. Anthropologist Carol Worthman has spent years studying sleep, not as a fixed biological need, but as something shaped entirely by environment, what she calls sleep ecology. In small-scale societies without electric light, sleep isn't private, it isn't solitary. People often sleep in shared spaces, near a fire, with the sounds of family and community layered around them. Waking in the night wasn't lonely because you were never really alone in the first place. There was always a low hum of breathing, embers, maybe a baby fussing, maybe an elder shifting in their sleep. Night was social, even while everyone appeared to be resting. Compare that to your bedroom. Door closed, curtains drawn. Silence, except for the sound of your own thoughts, which is precisely the environment in which a 3 a.m. wake-up feels most like a crisis instead of a rhythm. There's a more recent study that complicates the story even further, though, and it's worth sitting with. In 2015, sleep researcher Jerome Siegel led a landmark study observing 3 pre-industrial societies still living without electricity: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. Published in Current Biology, the research found something unexpected. These groups didn't show the clean, biphasic first sleep, second sleep pattern Ekirch had documented in old European records. Instead, they slept in a single block, going to bed hours after sunset and waking before sunrise, sleeping less overall than the average modern adult believes they need, and reporting almost no concept of insomnia at all. So which is it? Did ancient humans sleep in 2 parts or 1? The honest answer is both, depending on latitude, season, and how long the darkness actually lasted. Ekirch's Europeans faced brutally long medieval nights with no artificial light at all, which split their sleep in 2. Siegel's modern hunter-gatherer groups, closer to the equator with shorter, more consistent nights, slept in 1 continuous stretch. What united both groups wasn't the number of segments. It was the absence of anxiety about the segments at all. Nobody in either dataset described lying awake at night and worrying that something was wrong with them. That worry, it turns out, might be the most modern part of the whole story. Not the waking, the panic about the waking. Think about what that means for you, tonight, staring at your ceiling. Your ancestors would have recognized this exact moment. The dark room, the alert mind, the quiet body. They just wouldn't have reached for a phone, checked the time, and started calculating how many hours of failed sleep they had left. They would have simply been awake, the way a fire is sometimes bright and sometimes low, without treating either state as a malfunction. There's something almost tender in that. The idea that your worst nights, the ones where you feel most broken and most alone with your thoughts, are actually the nights your body is doing something ancient and ordinary, not falling apart, just remembering. Modern sleep medicine has started to catch up to this. Some clinicians now tell patients who wake at 3 a.m. and can't immediately fall back asleep to simply get up, sit somewhere calm and dim, and let the mind wander instead of forcing sleep or reaching for a screen. It's a near-perfect reconstruction of first sleep, minus the fire, minus the neighbor's house call, minus the centuries of shared darkness that used to make it feel unremarkable instead of frightening. You can't get those centuries back. You can't recreate a village asleep around you, breathing in the next room, embers glowing low. But you can maybe borrow the posture, the lack of panic, the willingness to let an hour of dark wakefulness simply be an hour instead of evidence that something in you is failing. So the next time you wake at 3 a.m. and your mind won't quiet down, you might ask yourself a different question than the one you usually ask. Not, why can't I sleep? But what would I have done with this hour 10,000 years ago? Maybe you'd have tended a fire. Maybe you'd have talked quietly with someone beside you. Maybe you'd have simply lain there, awake, unbothered, waiting for the second half of the night to come find you, the way it always eventually does. It's 3 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling. But maybe for the first time, you're not alone in it. Every human who ever lived before electric light has been exactly here, wide awake in the dark, waiting for sleep to return like it always has. It always has.